about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage. Over.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo.
And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you. So glad you could be with us, whether you're tuning in at www.behindenemylinesradio.us, or if you're listening to us on your AM radio, or FM radio, or internet radio. We're glad you're tuning in. Or if we're traveling along with you as a podcast, we're glad to be along for the ride. We have a huge show this week. You know, I hate using words like huge and tremendous and stupendous and all that. But in this case, we have a really jam-packed show. It's going to be the first of many jam-packed shows. We're going to be joined by our friend Jon Lubecky, who's going to be teaching us from his first-hand accounts the real lessons to be learned from the special election in South Carolina. You know, everybody's been going on and on and on about the Georgia race and how it demoralized the Democrats because they spent so much money and they got so little in return. But is that case really the case study or the outlier? We're going to talk to Jon about what the Democrats did in South Carolina that should have a lot of conservatives and Republicans worried. We're then going to be joined by probably one of the most unique interviews we've ever done. A gentleman by the name of Ali Safavi, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. Now, what is that, you may ask? Well, that's an organization that sees themselves as the parliament in exile and in total opposition to the current Iranian government, led by a female Muslim who believes in secular Islam, who believes in democratic pluralistic Iran, and who have been working with activists and people resisting within Iran as part of the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran to oppose the Ayatollahs and really at great cost to their own lives. I mean, we'll get into that with Ali later, but it's one of the most important interviews we've ever done, and it really is a movement that is trying to take down the Iranian regime's clandestine nuclear program. And they were a big part of exposing it back in 2002. What an amazing story Ali has to tell. And we're happy to bring it to you. But we have to talk about some domestic stuff first. Programming note, just for the next couple of weeks, we're going to have some amazing shows coming to you from the Federation for American Immigration Reform's Hold Their Feet to the Fire Radio Row. The interviews we've lined up so far are huge guests. Senator Mike Lee of Utah, Michelle Malkin, Senator John Boozman of Arkansas, so many others. Sheriff Sam Page is going to be on the show. It's going to be an amazing couple of weeks with some great interviews talking about American immigration reform. But that's next week. Before we get to all that, we got to talk about the implosion of the Democrats lately. And I don't want to belabor the point because we're going to be talking about what they did right in South Carolina, but man, did they get it wrong in Georgia. From choosing an outsider candidate to having Hollywood come into a suburban district, for misidentifying a conservative district as a Trump-leaning district, and not recognizing the difference in the character of the voter. They made a whole bunch of mistakes in that race. And I know it's been talked about ad nauseum in the media, and I'm going to leave that to them. But coming up right after this break, we're going to talk to Jon Lubecky, friend, part of our CPAC family, retired Army sergeant, and he worked on the race in South Carolina, but not who you think he worked for. And he's going to tell you how this campaign, if replicated, could mean trouble for the Republicans in the House races in 2018. That comes up right after the break. Gene Baradelli, Behind Enemy Lines. We'll be back right after these brief words. If you're a long-time listener of the show, or maybe this is your first time listening, you can probably tell that me and the gang here, we like to have our share of fun, whether it's on or off the air. We talk about 2-drink minimum radio and no medication Wednesdays or whatever day it may be. That's why when we found the people at Less Government, More Fun, we knew it was a match made in heaven with this show. Folks, we live in a time where government is out of hand. Our founding fathers did not intend government to be all-consuming in all parts of our lives. That's why we are telling you to go to lessgovmorefun.com, check out the website, check out the swag. What the people want is less government, more fun. Pass it on, make it happen.
Who might you save?
Your mother, your father, your husband, uncle, aunt, son.
Learn FAST, F-A-S-T, the sudden signs of a stroke, and you could save.
Your friend, teacher, boss.
F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. F-A-S-T. That's F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. The sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in the recovery of
your neighbor, the waiter, grandmother, grandfather.
So learn FAST, the sudden signs of a stroke, then pass it on, because you never know who might save you.
Your wife, your colleague.
Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Behind Enemy Lines Radio is all about being right. No, seriously, it is. If you ever listen to Russ Gallo or me go back and forth on some issue, we always want to make sure that we remember who said what and when we said it. That's why we go to goonrecord.com. It's a brand new social media website. Challenge people on what they believe, whether it's in politics, sports, entertainment, finance, whatever. There's a category for you at goonrecord.com. Check it out right now. Tell us, what do you stand for? It's time for you to go on record.
Behind Enemy Lines. Back on the air.
Gene Baradelli, back behind Enemy Lines. You know, everybody's been talking about the race for the special election in Georgia and the lessons that we learned from that and how demoralizing it is for the Democrats. But what did we learn from the special election in South Carolina? Well, I'll tell you this, folks. What I see from that, in speaking to friends, including our next guest, doesn't look so good for Republicans. On the line with me, friend of the show, he's been a past guest on the show. He's an advocate for veterans and across the country. He's well known for his efforts in that, especially during the presidential race. Talking about our friend and CPAC family member, Jonathan Lubecky. Sarge, what's going on, pal?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. As I told you earlier, and as you mentioned, I work on campaigns. My primary of expertise is advising candidates on veterans issues and helping them, recruit veteran voters, which has been very rewarding and cathartic for me as a vet. But it's also given me a really interesting look into the political process, especially in relation to veterans. And I've gotten involved in races I probably wouldn't have otherwise. Prime example is the recent South Carolina 5th congressional race, which was an open seat left by Mick Mulvaney when he was appointed to the LMB. That is the race of all four of the House races. That is the race that Republicans need to be most scared of.
And let's explain why. Just give a background here and to show that I actually know something, because John's going to be the expert on this whole thing. He lived and breathed this race for weeks. This was a race that should have been a clear Republican win. This was a district that was double digit in favor of Republicans. It was Cook had it at plus 10, or no wait, you had it at plus 10. Everyone else had it over plus 10. But those numbers are deceiving, aren't they, John?
They are, and some other numbers are Trump won that district by plus 19. Mick Mulvaney, just this past November, won that district by plus 18.
So unlike Georgia, this is not only a conservative district, but a Trump district, because they were making that distinction on the news a lot, right?
Exactly. Now, one of the things with South Carolina is we have 420,000 veterans in the state of South Carolina, and actually it's probably more than that now because those numbers are a few years old, which means there's about 70,000 veterans in the 5th Congressional District. only, I believe it was 88 or 89,000 people cast votes. And this is why I explained it to candidates. Winning the veteran vote, especially in South Carolina, but honestly in any state, will swing an election. There's typically 10% of the electorate.
Now, typically, that's usually a safe Republican vote, right?
Well, that's what, conventional wisdom is, but I'll tell you, conventional wisdom's wrong. Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, IAVA, surveyed their members about a year and a half ago, and they came to the conclusion, based on survey responses, 14% of veterans vote Democrat no matter what. 26% vote Republican no matter what. The rest are swing voters who vote based on their opinion of a candidate on their top three issues. And veterans issues are always one of those top three issues. What's interesting in SC5 is you had two candidates. One who was exceptionally pro-veteran. His father spent 29 years in the actually in Army Infantry, Army Air Corps, and then the Air Force. And then you had another candidate who has no relation to the military whatsoever, but who made the argument on the South Carolina House floor that PTSD does not exist, and that anybody can be diagnosed with PTSD by going in a back room, playing with coloring books, and chewing on a desk.
That's absolutely ridiculous, by the way.
I was shocked, and I'll be honest, that's why I actually approached Archie Parnell and said, I want to help you.
All right, so let's get this straight. The guy who said those statements on the House floor in South Carolina, that was the eventual winner and the Republican candidate, right?
That is correct.
Wow.
And he also further stated that when it came to law enforcement, although it's easy to extrapolate this belief to veterans and military, they know it's a dangerous job when they sign up for it. Therefore, the government has no responsibility when they get injured.
That's absolutely crazy. If anything, government has no responsibility because those are your employees that you're putting into hazard, and ridiculous. Okay, obviously, listen, we're all on the same page when it comes to veterans issues, me and John, and I'm sure our audience is as well. So this prompted you. Now, truth be told, you're a staunch conservative, fiscal conservative, national security and all that. But these words, I mean, in essence, you're kind of an issue advocate more than a party advocate, right, John?
Absolutely. I've consistently said and lived my life and worked my career. I don't work for parties. I work for people. And there are areas where, specifically the drug war, gay marriage, those things where I do side with the more liberal elements of society. But, I work for people. And in SC5, they spent less than the national average on a congressional campaign. Average congressional campaign, I believe it's 1.2 to 1.4 million. They spent around 800,000.
So this is the Parnell campaign.
The Parnell campaign.
Okay.
The DNC or DCCC contribution was 275,000. See, the thing with Georgia is neither party can replicate Georgia on a large scale. They can't do it in 50 or 100 races in 2018. The Parnell campaign can be replicated, especially in close districts. They showed that the Democrats showed, and yes, Archie Parnell lost by 3.2%, which is the closest race in 117 years in South Carolina.
Well, listen, that's one way to put it. The other way to put it is that he lost by 2,900 votes.
Exactly.
The percentages are a little misleading in this respect. Yes, smaller district, different formation of this district. This was a district that has no Democratic stronghold, right? There's no big urban area where you can count on a reliable number of Democrat votes to just spring up without any effort, right?
There's tiny strongholds, but, for example, downtown Rock Hill. But Rock Hill is a tiny town in South Carolina. It's not a Columbia. It's not a Charleston. But what the Democrats proved was they took a very center candidate who was for gun rights, who was for tax reform, who was for all the things that most people on the right typically stand for. And honestly, if he had another 250,000 or another 2 weeks, he probably would have won the election. And that is something that can be replicated, especially if the Republican